So the next step in adding our quizzes into Moodle 2.3 is adding the quiz itself. In the last step we added the questions into the question bank, but now we actually want to add the quiz itself. So let's say I'm having a quiz on March 30th. I want to go to that add an activity or resource, and this time I'm going to select quiz. So I'm going to go ahead, scroll down in the materials picker, select that quiz radio button, and then go down here and hit add. And when I do that, the first thing it's going to ask me for is a name. So maybe I call this chapter quiz. And I'm going to go on down to the next section, starting with timing. So timing a quiz has to do with changing the window for how long a quiz could be open, changing the time limit, how much time the student might have to take the quiz, when it would expire, when's the last time the student can take the exam, or a grace period. So how long after the student has completed it can they go back and change answers. So depending on how I set my quiz up, I'm going to choose some of these options intermittently. So for example, if I say the student has between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on March 7th to take this quiz, I would go ahead and change these settings to 9 o'clock, maybe I change these to all zeros, to 5 o'clock, so that'd be 1700, on that March 7th day. If it's not taken in that window, I can't take the exam. But maybe I don't want to set a specific time limit. I don't want to limit them to the amount of time taken. Everything needs to be submitted before time expires or they're not counted. So they can't start an exam at 4 o'clock, forget about it, come back after 5 o'clock and try to resubmit it. But I can change those and toggle those based on the settings of my exam. The next thing it asks me is for grade category. So where do I want this to happen or where do I want this to fall in? Typically, I'm going to set this to highest grade. The only time that this doesn't end up as highest grade is when I'm taking multiple attempts or I'm allowing the students multiple attempts at this exam. But in most cases, you're not going to do that. Attempts allowed, if I want them to take more than one attempt at the exam, I can do that, but typically you're not going to do that either. Layout, how is the question order going to look? So I can either choose to have my layout exactly as things were imported or added to the actual exam, or do I want these questions shuffled randomly? Consider, though, if you shuffle questions randomly, they're not going to appear in the same order, which could throw off a progressive gain of questions or a progressive methodology of adding questions. And then new page, how many questions do you want to appear on a single page? So you can either do this as every single question is a new page, or you can set all questions to one page, or intermittently to whatever size you want it to be. I tend to prefer never all question on one page. The question behavior has to do with inside that question, how does it behave? So for example, if I want to shuffle the answers of the questions, I would leave this setting to yes. If I ask how questions behave, if I have specific feedback that I want them to get out of a question, maybe I say immediate feedback. If it's a question that I'm grading manually, I don't want to get it or generate an answer from that question, I might set that to manually grade it. Typically, it's left as a default to deferred feedback, which essentially means the student won't get feedback on their exam until it's completed. And the review options stem from that as well. The review options define when the student gets feedback and immediately before or after what time things are supposed to happen. So immediately after the attempt means what are they going to receive in terms of feedback? Are they going to get their score for that question immediately after they guess a question answer? Then later on, maybe that while the quiz is open, they can see some of those things differently. And then immediately after the quiz is closed, what it is they're going to see. This is important because it defines how the exam is given. So if I say I don't want the students to receive their quiz question answers until the quiz is completed. I would deselect all of these answers because I don't want them to be receiving their marks and their scores as the question goes along. But after the quiz is completed, I'm okay with them seeing it. The display show the user's picture, which is really up to you if you want to help recognize the student, but if you just need the name, that's fine too. Decimal places and grades, this is what the highest decimal place number that it'll round to in order to determine the scores. So for example, if I have no decimal places, it's always going to round up to the whole point. So if they scored a 64.449, it's going to round down to a 64 and vice versa. I'm going to leave that set to 2. Some other things you can add are a password restriction. If I was maybe giving the students an exam at separate times during the day and maybe I changed the password so they can't go back in and look at things, I could change that. And if I wanted to somehow delay the attempts so they would not be able to retake the exam until after an hour or 2 or however many or how much time elapsed, I can do that as well. And this overall feedback is typically feedback that's generated at the completion of the quiz. So for example, if I wanted to say immediately after the quiz, thank you for taking the exam, here's the information that students tended to do well on, and here's what they didn't, I can include that as part of that feedback file. But for now, I'm just going to hit Save and Return to Course. And this will take me back to that main course page. So what I want to do is go and find that chapter quiz I just created. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And when I do that, this tells me the quiz is opened at this time and no questions have been added yet. Well, I want to edit this quiz because I want to add questions to this exam. So I'll click on Edit Quiz. I'm going to go ahead and go over to this Question Bank Contents. And typically this will show up as hidden. But if I click this Show button, this will toggle on all of my questions. So remember, now I have these questions in my course, and I want to be able to add these questions to this exam. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these questions by using this checkbox up at the top. And I'm going to scroll down to where it says Add to Quiz. When I do that, you'll see that on the left-hand side now, all of those quizzes are added and are available within the quiz. Okay? So now that chapter quiz, if that's all my questions, it's pretty much ready to go. What I can also change is the order and paging. So since all this stuff is in here, if I want to change the question order of things, if I decide that question 7 should actually be right after question 3, what I can do is reorder those numerically. So if I go in and make this question number 31, because it works in sets of 10, so that way I can take large chunks of questions up to 9 and move an entire section after another section. So I'm going to hit Reorder Questions down here, and when I do that, it took that question and moved it directly behind question number 3, the one I had in number 7. So that's my way and my ability to move questions around after the quiz has already been added. So what happens next? So since my quiz has been edited, I can just save whatever it is it's worth and then go back on my breadcrumbs and click this chapter quiz. So if I hit Attempt Quiz Now, this will show me what my quiz looks like in the form that the student will take it. So for question 1, I have my question, the available answers. And if I look at this question and I decide, this question isn't exactly the way I want it, I can click on this pencil down here that says Edit, and that'll allow me to go in and change whatever I need to change within that question. But if I'm satisfied with this, if I look through this question, or look through this test, and go through it, and even if I want to, one of the things I can do is just run through the test. Check all the answers. See if everything is the way I want it to be. And that's just a good practice thing, regardless of whether that's a test in Moodle or on paper, because it allows you to check whether or not your answers are the correct ones. And so there's no problems for students. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. It'll tell me the status of all the questions when I'm done with the questions. This is what it'll show the students as well. And then the button down here that says submit all and finish. If I'm a student, I would just hit that button that says submit all and finish. It tells me that I won't be able to submit it after the fact. And then it'll go in and show me that it's finished. Now, it's not showing me a score for this because I'm not technically a user of my own class. But when a student would go in and do this, it would show them immediately their score if I wanted it set up that way. Remember, when we went into that feedback area, we determined that the student would not receive their score until after the exam. And that's the way this quiz is set up.